Hello and welcome, I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We're soloing the Stalker with Dark Phantom, who needs about 42,000 XP to go to get to level 29. We're a few beads away. We might get there this session. But right now, we're working on the Oobleman story arc, and we need to investigate more fifth column in Steel Canyon. And as we go, I want to talk a little bit about accuracy and hitting and miss streaks. Guys, I actually can't believe I did this. It's still my holiday, so I had some time today, and I should have been doing something more interesting, but I actually went through the combat log, and I messed it up a little bit, but I did find 100 consecutive, well, it's sort of consecutive, I'll explain that in a minute, two-hit rolls. So what happened is I just went backwards from the last one in the last mission all the way up, and I did about 60 of those, and then I had some sort of a scrolling issue where I ended up way at the top, so I think I ended up with 60 consecutive two-hit rolls in the last mission and about 40 consecutive two-hit rolls in one of the first two missions. And when I was about halfway through at 50, it was looking like the average was about a 56. And I thought, yep, it's high. But then the last batch from the first mission, it seemed a bit lower. And I'm not sure exactly where the error happened. I wish I were. I didn't pay that much attention to it. But when I realized there looked like a difference between the first half and the last half of the data, I did at least divide it by the first half and the second half, and the first half has a 53 average and the second half has a 47 average. I don't know that that's... I didn't test that to see if it's statistically significantly different. It looks like we did have a slightly better chance to hit, like roll better to hit in the first mission or second mission, and worse in the last mission. But I was wrong. I was fairly sure with 100 I was going to get a, 57 or 58 or 60 average, and I did not. Do I hear a glowy? Just making sure I don't. I want to make sure I don't talk over it for myself. I then looked at whether it looks autocorrelated. I just eyeballed it, I labeled each roll. And I don't know if this is the right way to do it, really. High, medium, or low. So if it was 0 to 30, 01 to 33, it was a low roll. If it was 67 to 199, it was a high roll. And if it was 34 to 66, it was a medium roll. And then I just put that in the spreadsheet and looked at the sequence of HM, HM, LLL. Eyeballing it, I didn't see any obvious streakiness. I don't have the data to really know for sure. I would say at this point, just based on the 100, I mean, you'd need thousands of rolls and much better record keeping than I'm capable of doing or willing to do just for the game. But I feel like because there does seem to be streakiness, and because just at a most possibly surface level it looked like I was doing better in one mission than in another, I think it's possible that maybe, depending on how they have it coded, perhaps they choose a different number seed as you enter each mission, which would make sense. It's instanced. And, some of the seeds just end up with higher numbers than others just by coincidence, since you only have a small sample in a given mission, right? You're only going to make 100 or 200 attacks. It could be a little bit high or low just because of the small sample size, right? One of the things I saw at the very beginning, when I was on like 25, it was over 60, and I thought, man, I'm proving myself right here. I could have stopped there and said, hey, I looked at 25 and it was over 60, but I said, no, that's not enough sample size. I wanted to go to 100. Let's keep going. And one of the things I saw that as I kept going is it kept getting lower. It kept getting closer to 50. And so one of the things that's true about data analysis is if there's a true average, a parametric mean as they call it, the higher your sample size, the closer you will get to the parametric mean until you sample the entire population, right? 100% of it, you will get the actual parametric mean. And so when you see values continuing to change in one direction as you increase the sample size, and that direction is the expected average value, that means usually you don't have a big enough sample, and you need to keep going so that you can get a big enough sample size to test your hypothesis. And so, yep, I guess I'll eat a little bit of crow here and say, as far as I can tell from that 100, that, admittedly small 100 roll sample size, and unfortunately it wasn't 100 straight rolls in a row because of that scrolling error, and I wasn't going to go back and redo it. And I couldn't find the original place because it was so many lines of text. And I didn't want to spend that much time on it, guys. I really didn't. From what I can tell, there does not seem to be the issue that I thought, which is that the game tends to roll high on the D100. It seems to roll an average of 50. I even looked at, because at one point when I was doing it, I said, well, maybe it's averaging 50, but I feel like I'm seeing an awful lot of very high and very low numbers. So I just said, okay, well, how many out of 100 rolls, how many were 1 to 10, how many were 10 to 20, and so on. And you would expect 10 of each. I got 9 to 10 of each, and then all of the 9s, right, seemed to lump up. I got extra in one, I can't remember which number, 16 in the 60s, I think it was. It's probably not enough to expect any sort of strange error. It's a little odd, but my guess is if you did 1,000 of those, that would probably go away. And since all the other ones were 9 or 10, there's no reason to believe that one stretch of 10 numbers is somehow more likely to appear. It's probably not the case. And I suspect if I ran a goodness of fit test on it or something, or a chi-square test, it would not be statistically significantly different. I didn't bother with that because eyeballing it, it actually looks pretty clean. Way cleaner than I thought it was, than I thought it would be. Now, I do think that, there do seem to be periods, you can see it on the videos, where I seem to miss a lot. And I had sometimes thought, like, we'll play 4 missions, and I'll go through 3 missions and not notice anything, and then the 4th mission, I'm constantly complaining about misstreaks. And I wonder if it really is the case that it's just, that's the random number seed we're on for that mission, and the next mission it chooses a different number seed. Now, I didn't look at the opponent rolls, right? So we weren't looking at every roll. I was just looking at my rolls. I don't expect there to be anything different from the opponent rolls. If I took 150 of mine and 50 of the opponents, my guess is it probably would be an average of 50 also. I don't see any reason why that would be different. The other thing I do want to say probably didn't affect it much because it was only 4 or 5 of them. 4 or 5 times the game said you were forced to hit by the streak breaker. That means I rolled a miss, but it doesn't tell you what you rolled. So we don't know, did we miss by 1 or by 20? I went back and scrolled up and just looked for the previous instance of the same thing, like Shadow Punch or Shadow Maul, and whatever that 2 hit was, I just added 1 to it for the purpose of calculating the average, right? So in one of the cases, I was at 95 on all of the attacks before and after that. So since they are enhanced the same way, I assumed 95 on that one as well. And missing means I rolled probably a 96. We just don't know, right? If one of them had a 76 to hit and I missed, or the streak breaker forced me to hit, that means it rolled a 77 or higher, 76.1 or higher. We don't know what I rolled, right? We don't know if I rolled a 77 or a 97. And so that gave the game the benefit of the doubt, really. But because there were only 4 of those, I don't suspect there would have been much, if any, difference in the final numbers. So anyway, that's just a little bit of statistics. Now, one of the things that I said, I eyeballed to see whether it looked like it was autocorrelated, but you really can't. That's very hard to do, to find out if the numbers are autocorrelated, which means that the number rolled now is influenced by what you got before. I've always felt like a high roll tends to beget another high roll, right? If you roll over 80, the next roll often is also over 80. If you roll under 20, the next roll is often also under 20. I saw this a couple times where I rolled like a 1 and an 8, or I rolled like a 97 and a 99. I saw several 80s and 90s in a row and several below 20s in a row. But you expect that to happen a little bit in any random number sequence. So the question is it happening too much or the expected amount? And unfortunately, to do an autocorrelation like this properly, I would need thousands of data points, and I am not going to sit there and manually figure out thousands of rolls. It took me half an hour or something just to do 100. I'm not going to put 5 or 10 hours into it. It's not worth it. So I don't know. I guess I believe that more of it is my confirmation bias than I thought before. I always knew there was some. I guess I can no longer believe that the game is rolling high, even though I could have sworn it, and I would have been willing to bet money on it or influence. And I think there is some very, very, very circumstantial evidence, because I did not do it systematically. It was just luck, and it just so happened that I don't know the exact numbers, because I don't remember exactly where the scroll, where I rolled up and it all zoomed upward, like, I don't know, mouse mistake or whatever, mouse wheel, I don't know. I don't know exactly where that happened, because I didn't know that the numbers were going to look different until I had them done, and then I'm like, gee, I don't know where it starts. Somewhere in the bottom half of that list of 100, but I don't know if it's 50 to 100. I think it's more like 60 to 100, and so it's hard to tell. But there's very, very weak evidence. I wouldn't stand by it or make any bets on it, that maybe, possibly, perhaps individual missions have their own random number seed, and you might just be, by luck, at some spot on the random number table that happens to have a run of high numbers, which, is always going to happen, right? So just to explain the way this works, computers cannot generate true random numbers the way rolling a die works, and so it's a pseudo random number generator. And the way it works, it's not exactly like this, but you can imagine it like this, because it's pretty close, is that the computer has in its data banks a gigantic random number table of a billion numbers, right? A lot of numbers. And the random number seed just tells it where on that table to start, and then from there it just reads down. The reason I use this as an example is in the old statistics books, they used to have tables of random numbers, right? And it would just be a sequence of, say, 5 random numbers, and those random numbers would just be a column of like 50 numbers, and then next to it is another column of 50 numbers going down, right? Kind of like this, columns on a page. So there'd be like, I don't know, 10 columns of 5 random numbers, of a 5-digit number going down 50 times, right? So it would be, 500 random numbers. And the way you would use this is, oftentimes you only needed one number. So you would, beforehand, you would decide, I'm going to start, and you couldn't like bias it, like, I know where the numbers are. You might have to like pull out a deck of cards, right? And you say, okay, I'm going to start on the whatever column you draw, right? And we're going to use, if we pull hearts, we're going to use the first digit. If we need a 1-digit number, we'll use the first digit. If we pull spades, we'll use the second digit. If we pull diamonds, we'll use the third digit, and so on and so forth. So you pick which digit or digits you're going to use. If you need a 2-digit number, right, D100, you'd pick either the first 2 numbers or the second 2 numbers or the 4th and 5th number or the 3rd and 4th number, or however you want to do it, the 2nd and 3rd number. And you would just pick those numbers, and then you just go down the column using those same numbers, like the 2nd and 3rd number in the list, right, in the column, right, in each column. And so basically that's what the computer is doing. It's deciding where in the column, which column and which row to start on. And then once you start there, you just keep going down, right? And that's how you get a random number. And so there's this giant table of random numbers inside the computer, essentially. And the random number seed tells it where to start, right? On which part of the table to start, right? So let's do an email, just so I can show you what this looks like. So it would be like this. Whoops. I'm just banging numbers, right? And then you have another column next to it, another column next to it, another column next to it, right? So you would do. Is it not going to let me do this now? So you just imagine another column, another column, another column going all the way across, right? And let's say we agree I'm going to use the third and fourth number. And we're going to start here, right? And so the first random number is 38, the next random number is 10. Then you go to the next column, and then, okay, it's 63, and then 07, and so on. And so if you start here, and you start with these two numbers, the first number you pick will always be 63. So if you start there again the next time, you're going to get 63, and then you're going to get 07, and then you're going to get 38, and then you're going to get 10. And literally in computers, guys, if you don't reset the seed and you keep running on the same seed, you will get the exact same run. We actually had this happen in MATLAB at one point. Didn't realize it was doing it. Didn't set the seed, right? Didn't realize it was going to set the seed the same every time. And so I ran like 15 runs of a model, and like the statistics were so tight, I was like, how can it be? There's like no standard deviation at all. How can every run be the same? And my postdoc advisor was like, did you set the seed? And I was like, oh man, are you kidding me? So I had to have a little line in the beginning of code saying, set the seed from the system clock, right? So the system clock is some number, and it basically says, choose your row and column based on the hour, minute, and second of the day. And that's going to be different every time because it also means the day of the month and the year since 1950. And so using all of that, it picks a different row and column every time it runs the model. But as the computers got faster, after I was no longer a postdoc, the computers are much faster. What ended up happening is that code didn't work for really small models. We were doing fish schooling, right? So if we just had like 2 fish and we were running them, 10,000 time steps, it was so fast that it was repicking the same table every time because it was doing so many calculations, and I had put the seed generation inside the loop instead of doing it at the beginning of the run. So then every number in the sequence from each replicate, I had made a mistake and put the random number seed in the loop, so it was choosing a new seed like every time it picked a new fish or something like that. And so that all the fish were basically following the exact same trajectory because it was going from fish to fish so fast that it didn't have time to advance the seed to another part of the table because it was doing it more than once a second, right? And it can only generate a new seed per second. And so, yeah, this can really catch you. So what we had to learn to do was generate a new seed at the top of the program instead of in the lower loops where it's generating a new seed every single time. You don't want it doing that because if it's generating a new seed every time I punch these guys, it might happen so fast that you keep resetting to the same part of the table and you just keep repeating the same numbers over and over again, right? And so that was something. That's why I kind of know a lot about this stuff because it really messed up our models. We ended up with identical runs of the model, and I'm like, why are these guys ending up in exactly the same spot? Like literally if we overlaid the 3-dimensional positions of the fish schools, they're just 2 or 4 fish after 15,000 time steps or something, and they were supposed to be randomly choosing their directions, and they all ended up in the same spot. And we were doing this as a control to go, okay, let's do a random walk and make sure that this works, and then we'll come back and put the rules for fish schooling in because we were modeling fish schooling, and my undergrad was doing this. She was really good. She was a freshman at the time, really smart, ended up going to get her PhD in Germany in animal behavior, super, super smart. But she did the random walk, and she saw, like, how come they end up in the same spot? It's kind of cool, but I was like, But she was like, I don't know if it should happen that way. And I said, no, it absolutely shouldn't. And I realized that it was my mistake, right? We did the model, like the beginnings of the model together, and then she did a whole bunch of variations, and it all ended up the same. And she said, how come all the variations aren't doing anything? Is that what it's supposed to do? And I said, well, no. Random walk, they should all end up in different places. It's random. So I immediately knew, look at the seed, right? And I said, oh, we've got the seed nested too far down. It's inside of a loop that's triggering more than once a second. Don't do that. We have to pull it up to the top, right? And only have it done, have a loop happen, like have a seed generated every time you start the computer, like every time you start the run of the model, or begin running it, and then it will work out okay, right? Because once you start the seed, then it chooses a bunch of numbers, and it'll just keep choosing new numbers from the table. But if you start it at the same point, it will get you the same exact result. This is how, if you've ever seen like games like Civilization and other games that generate a map, and you have these people who do a let's play, and what they'll do is they'll generate a random map, and it has a seed, and then they'll post the seed on their video, right? So that if you want to play along with them and see if you can like do better with the same map as they have, it's a randomly generated map. How do you get the same map as they have? Use the same seed, and then you'll get the same random number generation, right? And so I don't know what's happening here with City of Heroes, but it wouldn't shock me if we get a unique seed at the start of every mission, right? Just like you get a unique seed at the start of every Civilization game when it generates a new random map, right? And if maybe some missions seem to be luckier than others because it's just where you start in the seed. I don't know, but it would make a lot of sense since missions are instanced that would be where the seed is set, right? It's sort of like doing a new replicate of 15,000 time steps for 64 fish when I was doing a fish schooling model, right? If you set the seed at the top, that replicate is going to take minutes to hours to run. So when you set the next replicate, it'll be a different seed. And then you're in a different part of the random number table. But if you set the seed every time the fish move, then it just kept resetting the seed, right? And so we had to learn the hard way not to do that. I probably would have known not to do it. I guess I didn't realize where I was putting the seed choice in the loop that we had generated. I guess I wasn't thinking about it, or I don't know. It took us a little while to debug it, but when I noticed where the seed was, I said, wait a minute, this shouldn't be down here this far. I think what happened is I probably copied the code from when I was a postdoc because I knew it worked, and back then it didn't matter. I probably had it that way, and I'm like, oh, we did this, we published a paper, did we mess it up? But I realized no, because in 2002 when we were doing this, we were working on like Pentium 2s or something, right? We were, the computers were running at a couple hundred megahertz, and the computers we had in my lab a few years ago when this happened were like running much faster, right? And so those computers were not capable of running the loop as fast, and therefore the seed was being reset. But the newer computers were going so much faster that it was doing more for after each seed choice, and therefore it kept repeating the same random number sequence. And by the way, that's something you want, right? You want it to be able to do that because it's a good way to test, right? Did we mess up the code? If we didn't, we should get the same number each time regardless, right? And then if you do mess up, oh, well, we don't have the same number because we messed something up in the code, right? And so it could be a good way to check, which is why they do it that way, right? I remember asking my postdoc advisor, why don't they automatically reset the seed? He said because sometimes you're going to want to rerun the model and confirm that every time you run it, it comes out the same, but for the random numbers, right? If you're doing something where the readings you're getting are entirely caused by randomness, then if you use the same seed, you should get the same result every time, and that means no other forces are working on the system. So you want that as a potential control. Obviously, they don't want that in a video game necessarily. On the other hand, they might want it as a control if they want to do something like, during testing, replicate the results of a mission. Like if you remember, I said that Statesman asked me the composition of my party and stuff, and then he tested something that I had complained about, right, to see whether, how the gameplay was doing, right? Now imagine he got my account information, went into the mission data, found the number seed, and was able to force his mission to start with the same seed, right? He could literally replay the mission that I played, blow for blow, right? I mean, it wouldn't be exact because, they wouldn't be able to replicate the sequence of attacks and defenses, but he could at least get the same string of luck that we had if he used the same seed. That's if it's done by mission. I don't know. And I doubt, I know he didn't go and try to pull the seed. He didn't ask anything like that, and I doubt they could have done it. And my guess is they don't. If they are generating a seed, a new random number seed for each mission, it's very unlikely that they're recording it anywhere. But it's the sort of thing that they might have done during development to check stuff, right? If you are having a problem and we use the same seed, then they'll get the same problem in their mission, right? So for example, let's say you're having a glowy problem, and where the glowies go is set when you enter the mission like this. Where the glowies are going to be positioned is randomly chosen by the first 7 random numbers chosen as I enter this mission. If we use the same seed every time, those glowies will always end up in the same place, right? So that would be a really good way to check. If somebody says, when I went into this mission, the glowy was inside a wall, right? Like suppose there was supposed to be a glowy here and it was inside the wall and I couldn't get to it. Well, if they keep entering the mission with the same seed and it keeps ending up in that wall, then they know what's going on, right? So it's a possible way to error check, which is why you want to have the option, but you also want to be able to set it to a different number on the table if you want things to be more like a truly randomly generated number, right? But this is why computers can never have truly random numbers, because what they're doing is they're getting numbers off of a table that's in a sequence, right? You see, look at 3 misses in a row, right? We're going to take a look at that when we finish this guy. Another miss. You see that? So let's see if we can find it. Missed 76, we rolled an 88. Missed, we rolled an 89. Missed, we rolled a 94. Missed, we rolled a 77, right? With a 76% chance to hit. That's 4 numbers over 76, and 3 of them 88 and above. That kind of thing looks pretty suspicious, right? What happened? We just walked into a mission. Did we just happen to get that spot on the random number seed, on the random number table? I don't know. I don't know if this sort of thing interests you guys, because I did a lot of work with simulation and random number generation for both my postdoc and for a big chunk of my initial work as a faculty member doing research on animal behavior, and doing a lot of simulation of that. And because I do a lot of statistical work just in general as a faculty member, looking at student grades and stuff like that. Statistics and random number generation and simulation have always interested me. And so, I don't know, I might be boring everybody to death talking about this stuff, but it's definitely of interest to me because it's kind of my area of expertise, and I have a lot of experience in it. Like, I gained increasing sympathy for the developers of City of Heroes, I guess would be the right word. Even as I was frustrated with some of it, as I continued working on computer modeling and had more and more issues with things like the random number generation and stuff, I understand, as someone who's done this, how hard it is to get the computer to generate a sequence of numbers that works like a randomly generated sequence. It's extremely hard to get a truly randomly generated sequence of numbers, right? Even with dice, the dice have to be weighted perfectly or you will not get it, right? There will be suspicious streaks of high rolls or low rolls or whatever. Um, they have to be perfectly weighted. Now, if you have perfectly weighted dice, by the way, that's why I bought a metal dice set, right? If you have perfectly weighted dice, they will give you true random numbers, assuming they are rolled correctly. So the dice have to be perfectly weighted, and you have to roll them properly. You have to shake it up in your hand enough times. You have to throw it properly or drop it down one of these die rollers where it bounces. It's like a little maze that the die bounces through and comes out in the dice tray. If you do it correctly, it is possible to generate truly random numbers, but it's extremely hard even with dice because the dice could be weighted. Why do I have metal dice? Well, I bought a bunch, 6 sets, I think, of dragon dice, all black with different colored numbers, green and yellow and stuff, when I was going to play Dungeons and Dragons. And um, I started fooling around doing some solo work just to get used to 5th edition before we started playing. And this is even before, and then I didn't know I was good at GM. And what I noticed was I seemed to be rolling really low a lot on the 20-sided dice. And I felt like, man, I'm missing a lot, right? Same thing as this game. So I went and did the same thing. I rolled it 100 times. And they rolled low, right? The average should be 10.5, and it was like a 9, right? So this die was rolling low. It wasn't weighted right. And so I looked up some information, and I saw somebody who like actually cut open some of his plastic dice with some kind of a saw, and he showed that on the inside they're not solid, right? There was like an air hole on one side, and he said, yeah, unless you get really, really good plastic dice, they're often unbalanced, right? Because in the casting process, the die won't be solid, and the bigger dice tend to have more of the air in them, like 20-sided, right? Versus the smaller dice, like the D4, there's not as much room in there for air bubbles and stuff. And so, what he argued was he said there was a test. I tried doing this with my dice. I couldn't get it to work. But the test was that you have to like put enough salt water into a glass. You put water in a glass and put enough salt in it that you increase the density enough that the die floats or something. And if it spins in a certain way, I can't remember, it's balanced. And if it spins in a different way, it's not. I tried doing it and I couldn't get it to work at all. And so I didn't want to cut open my dice to see. And the problem is, even if you cut one open and it looks balanced, it doesn't mean all the other ones from that company are balanced, because each casting process can end up with air bubbles. Their QA tries to get at it, but you never know, right? And so what he said is, you're better off with metal dice, because metal dice, the way they make them, they're not going to have air bubbles. And so they tend to be more balanced. And he showed it, right? He did some demos and showed that the metal dice that he had were, in fact, more balanced. And so then I went, and he had gotten his dice from a place called Skull Splitter. And no, they weren't a sponsor of his channel or anything. And so I went online and I found Skull Splitter dice, and I bought a set of metal dice. I can't remember if I did this as a player or if I was like, okay, if I'm going to GM, I need to make absolutely sure that my dice are completely fair, because I don't want to accidentally kill somebody using an unfair die, right? So I got a really cool set of sort of metallic, like brushed metal, silvery dice. I can't remember what they're, nickel or something. And they were really cool. And then I got a brass or bronze set, like a golden. They're not gold, but a gold-colored set when they had a sale. And I also bought a D100 plastic die from them because they do sell plastic dice as well. The D100, they didn't have a metal version, I think, at the time. It might have been like it was sold out or something. But the metal dice are beautiful, right? They don't roll as well, however, right? Because they're so heavy, you have to really throw them into the tray. So I bought myself a really expensive wooden tray with a leather bottom so that it wouldn't damage the dice when you roll them. And you have to throw them with some force. You have to make sure they spin because they tend to kind of just slide because they're so heavy, right? So again, in order to get a true random number, you have to do some work. It's not just the computer that sometimes can't generate a proper random number. It can be difficult even with dice, even with cards. There's a whole science to how many times do you have to shuffle a deck of cards in order to get a truly random sequence. I remember my mother my friends and I played card games so much. Things like Uno and Milborn and Skippo and stuff like that. We played cards so much that my mother, for fun, one Christmas bought me, when I was like in high school, or maybe early college, she bought me a card shuffler that, you put half the deck on either side and you push the button and it goes and it shuffles the cards. It worked great for a while, and then one side broke and it didn't spin properly and I couldn't use it anymore, which is kind of depressing. But yeah, that's one way you can possibly randomly shuffle. I don't even know if that's truly random. My friend Andy used to, instead of doing the riffle shuffle that most of us did, because he said you have to really do that right in order to get it to be random. You have to do it like 7 times or something. And even there, I don't know if it will be, depending on how you're doing the riffle shuffle, and how you're splitting it up when you're cutting it in half to riffle it again. But what he used to do is he would just put all the cards down on the table and just mush them around in a giant sloppy pile and then gather them back up. And he said that's true randomness, right? Because you're not relying on the interleaving of the cards or anything like that. Now, I don't even know if that is. My guess is you have to do that a certain way or you're going to get a non-random sequence in that too. So it's actually very hard to get truly random numbers, no matter what technique you use. And so as I've learned more and more about the generation of random numbers and random number seeds and all the rest of it, I've become increasingly forgiving of the City of Heroes guys. I mean, they did their best with the streak breaker. They did try to make sure that if suspiciously long streaks of misses happened, that they would basically GM fiat it and say, no, we're not gonna let that happen. Yeah, the only thing that frustrated me was that they didn't really understand the statistics. I marked the other way, but I'm not sure which way we go here. They didn't really understand statistics, so when I was trying to explain to them about things like autocorrelation and that sort of thing, they tried to test it and they didn't do it right. I remember Castle setting up Brawl, right, which is a 75% to hit against a white con minion, and he just set his character to auto and logged it, and he said we expect 7,500 hits out of 10,000, and he came back from lunch and he checked it and he had roughly 7,500 out of 10,000. Said, see, it works. And I said, that's not what we're saying. I'm not arguing that that you don't hit 75% of the time. I'm arguing that you hit, like, if you, and I tried to explain to him, if your test had generated 7,500 straight hits and 2,500 straight misses, it would have still been 75-25. But you would not expect that, would you? Right? You would not expect 7,500 straight hits followed by 2,500 straight misses. You expect them to be interspersed, right? 3 or 4 hits and then a miss, and then 3 or 4 more hits and then a miss, and so on and so forth. Maybe 2 misses in a row and then 10 hits in a row. That's what you expect to see. And so I said, your test doesn't answer the question, are the numbers autocorrelated? Right? I'm not arguing that whether the long-term average is 75%. I'm arguing whether the short-term sequences in bursts are autocorrelated or not. And what he said was something like, well, in short bursts, it's a small sample size, so you really can't count that. If you're doing autocorrelation, you have to look at the short bursts. Just a lot of them, right? You have to see whether the short bursts over and over again end up being high, 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 low, 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 high, 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 low, 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 right? If that happens too much, that's an evidence of autocorrelation. Now, as I said, eyeballing it, just looking at it, and just coarsely looking at high being a number like 65 versus or 67 versus low being a number like 30. Eyeballing it, it looked pretty good to me, right? It didn't look autocorrelated too much, but real autocorrelation, very hard to test, and you can't really eyeball it like that. Anybody who says they can see autocorrelation is lying to you. You have to do a brute force test, and you need a very large sample size. So anyway, that's enough about statistics. We are fighting Uberman, and I think, is he here? He's here, and he's an elite boss. Okay, so we have plenty of inspirations. Let's check this area. So, okay, what's going to be hard about him is he's with these other guys. So we're going to want to pull these guys. I don't like pulling as a stalker, but they're a little too close to Uberman. So we're just going to hit him and let him come to me. Right, and then we'll beat him up. So we're going to almost certainly need the defense inspirations, right, the Lux, because, not so much because of Uberman, although he will be tough, he's purple, but we're going to need the defense inspirations, the Lux, because the other guys will be attacking us while we're fighting Uberman, and we're going to have to, we're not going to be able to separate him from all these guys. Right? We're just not. Like, all these guys are going to get involved in this fight. And there's really no way to separate him. I might be able to take these two guys out, but we probably don't need to. So we want to make sure we hit. We want to do a lot of damage, and we're going to take the big luck. That should protect us against those guys, and let's see how we do. Oh, man. We definitely want to throw as many Shadow Mauls as possible to try to do the collateral damage. Okay, we're doing some good damage to him. Let's get some endurance. Okay, that's good. Alright, so we're going to try a placate on the next time the Assassin's Eclipse comes up, which is right now. We took that one guy out by collateral damage, and we've almost got him, guys. Oh, come on. You see what I mean? When they run, they become unhittable. That's so annoying. I get him down to a sliver. Oh, I didn't realize how close I was to leveling. Maybe what I should have done was beaten up those guys and tried to level first. But we got him. Placate. Assassinate. Who are we fighting? We gotta get all the guards or we won't get credit. And that's mission complete, but we're going to go rescue the hostage. And we've got all of our buffs, so we're not going to worry about assassinating. We're just going to just do this. Didn't even need the self-heal. I am pretty happy with that, guys. Uberman complete. We beat a +1 purple elite boss. I'll take it. And we couldn't even separate him from his little minions. Alright, so that takes care of him. We're going to go to Christine Lansdale next. But first, we want to go level up and get some slots. You're going to get some nice slots. Valkyrie, level me up. Okay, so what do we want to do here? So, my dilemma. Shadow Punch comes up the most. So putting damage on that is good, but it does the least damage. Shadow Maul does the most damage, but it comes up the least often because it takes it a longer time to recharge. So what do we do? Could put one on each. Could put one on Smite. Smite's sort of the compromise. It does more damage than Shadow Punch, not as much as Shadow Maul. Recharges in between. I actually think I'm going to do Shadow Maul. Because it's an AoE. And that means we get area. We will do the damage to multiple guys. Okay, let's go to the base. Because we have at least one damage enhancer already in there. And the nice thing about IOs is once we put them in, they never expire. So I can put them in right now and it's not, you know, like it doesn't matter, right? So let's go to the base and we have at least one damage E. There we go. We have a level 30 damage. We can pop that right on here and it will do plus 34%, which is about what these guys are on, right? So it's equivalent of a +1 enhancement. So that's going to do some more damage. And we have a single origin recharge enhancer. Do we need that? Not really. Single origin endurance reducer. I mean, I guess we could. And then we could do, I don't know which one, any one of these. Oh, no, wait, it's recharge. That's not endurance. Recharge, here we go. Okay. We can sell the rest of those. Let's go ahead and do that. I hate carrying them around. And then, oh, wait, we have an accuracy too. Nice. I don't know whether it's worth doing that at this point or just, where's the med lab? There we go. I don't know whether it's worth doing it at this point or just selling them. But let's go ahead and sell the rest of this stuff. And here we go. We have another damage. We have a bunch of these. We can use all of these. All right, so let's go back to the lab. And we can make more. Let's see what we got. So, damage. We need Masterwork Weapon. We can make this one. And that one. And that one. Very nice. We can make this. And that. This is excellent. Or we can make all of these guys. Alright, so all we need is to find a Masterwork Weapon, which I think was up here. Somewhere. Yep. We don't have a lot of them here, but we might have them in another spot. Because I have so much salvage. So we'll go ahead and create that. And now, on this power here, boom. We now have double generic invention enhancers. So these will never expire, and it will always be that plus 69%. So now we're going to be doing 115 damage a shot instead of 67, right? That is awesome. So that's actually pretty good. We can put the rest of these in the table here because we don't need them just yet, but we will use them when we get to level 32. or maybe even level 30, we can start ripping out the, or I guess 31. Where it's once the enhancements go yellow, we can start ripping them out and replacing them. I'm really pleased at this. These are a lot. That was a lot of really good enhancers that we got, recipes that we got. So Independence Port, that's where Christine is, I believe. And we're at 50 minutes, so I think we're going to stop here. Christine, isn't she in here? I think she is. Oh no, that's Lori Pennington. Sorry, I confused her with Christine Lansdale. Where is Christine? Here she is. She's over there. Okay. She's by the hospital. So Christine is going to give us some missions, and I will start her off. And when we get to General Z, which I think is her story arc, I will bring you guys back to see how we're doing. Until then, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes, soloing the Stalker.